Last night was the first run of HBO's Real Sports in regards to Deshaun Watson, and they had several of his accusers on camera. Okay? The first accuser was Ashley Solis. She said this.
He ends up exposing himself, and I hurried up and covered him with the towel, and he said, "Oh, you don't have to worry about the towel." I said, "Yes, I do."
So then what happened?
He requested that I work on his abdomen. But the moment I went above his navel, he told me he didn't want me to work there. He wanted me to work lower. He just kept directing me to go lower and don't be scared. You can go in there. And I just started really freezing up at this point.
Can you explain that?
Like a wave just took over my body. I felt so hot. I was sweating. It was getting more and more clear that this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I thought the session was going to be.
Here's Kevin Stefanski, the head coach of the Browns, when he was asked about it today.
We've done a lot of work on Deshaun, the person. And there's legal proceedings ongoing. There's investigation ongoing. So I won't comment much further than that.
Here's Roger Goodell, Commissioner of the NFL, on the timetable of the investigation and when it's going to wrap up.
Roger, could you give us an update on where the Deshaun Watson investigation stands and perhaps a timeline for when we may get a resolution?
Sorry to disappoint you, but I can't give you a timeline because I think that process will go forward. I think we're nearing the end of the investigative period, and then at some point, as you know, this will be handled by our disciplinary officer, and that will happen hopefully shortly, and then we'll see where that comes out.
Judge Sue L. Robinson, by the way, is their disciplinary officer. So that's what she's a former federal judge as well. There's a lot to it, but I guess let me do this. In the limited aspects of which you have heard or you have seen, let me ask you, start with you, Jason Stewart. What's kind of the net takeaway from last night, from the Real Sports, and how you think it should affect what the NFL does?
The net takeaway, I think it continues to apply pressure on the Browns and by extension the NFL. The negative press or negative media that this continues to get, I think, is just amplifying the amount of attention on the contract that was given to Deshaun Watson, and they are going to have to keep answering questions, even though they probably thought in that initial press conference that they answered all the questions that needed to be answered. And also the net, of course, from that display of sound you just played was Roger Goodell made sure we knew that there is somebody else that's making this decision. And by the way, she's a female. Sue L. Robinson is going to be making this decision.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a obviously genius move by the NFL to make sure that the person who's evaluating all of these claims is in fact a female, and he's sure to point that out. Obviously, not all. It doesn't mean that all female have the same sensibilities, but it at least takes a lot of that pressure off of Roger Goodell to be sensitive to something that it's almost impossible for him to fully understand. All right, what about you? Dan Byer, what's your kind of net?
I didn't watch any of it, and honestly, the clip that you just played was the first part that I heard of it.
Yeah.
So if you're asking me to weigh in on the Real Sports piece last night, I can't do that.
Totally fair. Fair. I guess here's my question. Okay, this is an honest question. We can all, and you guys, if you guys don't agree, it's okay, right? I feel like we can all see what was going on here, right? Like we just you get enough of people telling relatively the same story. Now the question becomes, you don't want that to happen to somebody. It's not okay, but is not okay, and a series of it, and it being a pattern of behavior, is that enough of that type of behavior to stop him from playing football? That's my question. And I don't know what the answer is, right? Because here's the deal. In the court of law, like we've established, all right, if you commit this crime, it's between this long and this long, right? And then, of course, that can be whittled down. There can be parole. There can be all these other things, There's no real parameters for the court of public opinion. Right? There's no amount of suspension that is ever going to be enough for some people. But what is reasonable, what is fair, right? And to that, I'm not sure I have an answer, or if the answer that I have, it may sound a lot more terse than it actually is. So I'm just trying to figure out, right? Like,
yeah.
if you like, here's the thing, like if you have a DUI, like I think a DUI is a terrible thing. Okay, it's a terrible thing that you're recklessly putting yourself in a position to end somebody else's life. Forget about your own, because you're too selfish to simply press a button and call an Uber, right? But is getting a DUI, does that mean you can never be in your profession again? Are you automatically fired? Or are you suspended? Do you go through rehab? Like for this, like what is the proper punishment if we can vary on how many times it happened, but what is enough?
I think that, and I'm not going to answer your question, but I think what is so bothersome is not only is there not a punishment, there's almost a reward for Deshaun Watson. And it's not for reward for what he's doing. It's just that these women, were put in these situations that obviously altered their lives. And to be able to not have criminal charges being brought against him, and now to only have civil charges. I know there probably are people saying, well, they're just looking for the money, or they want the money grab. This may be the only way that they could maybe make Deshaun Watson have some sort of penalty for doing it. Now with a $230 million contract that's fully guaranteed, there is no penalty for that at all. Like that, like now that the money is not even an object if there was, some sort of ruling or some sort of settlement. Now it doesn't even matter. So with all of this, Deshaun Watson doesn't face any sort of punishment that really affects him, while these women's lives, they feel were ultimately changed by their interactions with Watson. I think that's probably what's so difficult for them.
It's very, very hard. You are completely correct there, right? It's no matter what punishment you have, he's still going to see a ton of financial gain. So is there really any sort of punishment? Okay. How about you, Jason Stewart? What is, I guess, fair? What's enough?
Okay, so I know we've brought this up before. So the Trevor Bauer situation, I think, is applicable in that Major League Baseball, a major sport, has deemed that even though the court system found no grounds for charges and no criminal proceedings, that Major League Baseball thought that the details in the situation warranted a 2-year suspension for a player without pay, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the only thing I could base that on. When I saw that penalty, I thought that sounds fair. That seems fair. So I guess I would have to relate it to this. If you're saying 8 games, I think that's probably not enough. So I don't know. I guess 1 season completely would be fair in my mind.
What do you think, Dan? I know you didn't feel comfortable answering the question, but
no.
Say it comes down and Roger Goodell's like, we're suspending him 1 year. What's your reaction?
Yeah, this actually kind of adds on to what I was saying. Was Deshaun Watson had no troubles sitting out last season. Now he was still getting paid. That would be the difference here. But again, the amount of money that he now has on his contract and what the Browns did with that year that he would maybe have to sit out, it's very, very minuscule for what he would actually be giving up. So to answer the question, I think if you are the NFL and you really do want to try to put a dent to it, it would have to be more than a year because of what the Browns did with the structure of that contract, which is crazy. Because what's his salary next season? It pales in comparison. Yeah, it's
insane.
But they structured it in a way where it's a really, really low number, and the extension doesn't kick in until the real money, like in 2023. So if he were to be suspended, he would only lose a small percentage of that. So what if? Let me offer this up. And by the way, here's the real kind of sinister part about it is, you're right.
Like, people should look at the structure of the deal where they did it, where the real money, but also he actually got that money up front, right? That money is sitting in escrow. It actually is paid out, even though contractually it doesn't go on the books until later on.
Yeah.
So
his base salary, by the way, would be just over $1 million for 2022.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, there is no guide for what to do here for the commissioner, right? There's no guide. But if the former federal judge, finds that, like, look, he should be suspended and he should be fined, like, why can't they go in and fine him $10 million, $15 million? Well, why can't they? Like, there's no, like, I don't know what the CBA says, but I'm guessing, okay, that this type of conduct and the black eye that it's given to the league, the black eye it gives to the team, why can't they? So that's just a question I have. And would that satisfy the masses, right? Would that satisfy people? Would he? And again, the question is also, like, would he learn his lesson? I'm not big on these therapeutic things, like, the different types of rehab, but not even offering up that you did anything wrong when there's some level of pattern of behavior here. I don't. Again, it doesn't rise to the level of the more aggressive sorts of sexual assault, right? It doesn't, right? And there are no claims of that. On the other hand, it doesn't mean that this is any less. This is not disturbing. That there's a pattern here. That it's not okay. But it's just like, what is the level? And the only reason I'm bringing this up is, in every other crime that's committed, there is, it's a difference between manslaughter and murder 2 or murder 1. And you know what I mean? Like, there's differences there, and the punishment is different. So I feel like they have a blank slate and ability to create some sort of pushback on this to the Browns, to Deshaun Watson, to his agent. On the other hand, I don't know how much we have to believe what the accusers said. I don't, like, that's their level of investigation. But I think, as you pointed out, Dan, like, it looks terrible right now for the Browns, for the league, that they give him a contract where no matter how many games he's suspended, it doesn't really affect how much money he's going to make. And all of this stuff, though it technically kept him from playing last year, that wasn't the real reason he didn't play last year. He doesn't get credit for time served. On the other hand, I don't believe, and I don't think anybody believes, he should lose his entire career over it. Do we? If we do, okay, that's a discussion to be had. But if we don't, then what level of it does it satisfy people? I don't. It's a real, like, these are real hard things. Right? These are real hard things. You can, and this is important to point out, you can say that is unacceptable behavior. You can say that he needs to sit. You can say that the league looks bad. The Browns should suffer some sort of negative consequences because they went, don't care about the process. We're paying the guy anyway, and we're going to change his contract where maybe it protects him a little bit more, even though he hadn't played it down for us. But I find it hard to think he won't play football again. So if the question is he's going to play again, what is the level of suspension which is appropriate, which is fair to all parties? And that number is somewhere in between never play football and play football right away. And whatever number that is that both sides are upset about, that's probably the one. And I think I agree with, whoever said a year, like, that would probably be, because then you could look down and go, like, look, didn't play football for 2 years. Now he can go to some sort of rehabilitation. He can go on a PR rehab campaign. Because I actually agree with what Kevin Stefanski's saying. I did the same thing when this thing came down. When it came down, I have 3 friends that are general managers, 2 guys that were director of player personnel. One is in a different position than he was then. But I called him, and all of them knew all the background to Deshaun Watson. They were like, I've never heard any of this stuff. And we all checked him out before the draft. So if you do your background check on Deshaun Watson, that's what you come up with. If you check what he did with massage therapist, the answer is different. How do we balance out all that? It's actually a really hard Sometimes answers are really hard to come by in which you're trying to be fair and reasonable and yet be upset and punish people and allow any sort of victim to feel like they've been heard. That's kind of my net takeaway.